Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. Welcome back to the OT is In podcast. In today's episode, I, your host, Sarah Collins, am joined by Amirra Condelee, an occupational therapist, stay-at-home mom, and finance advocate who's passionate about empowering families to make intentional choices around work, family, and money. Amirra shares her interest in both early intervention, occupational therapy, and personal finance. She opens up about the pivotal moment that she decided to transition from full-time OT work to being home with her young children. And guys, we all know that when we are making that decision, finances and logistics are one of our number one considerations and can be one of the most stressful aspects. The conversation dives deep into the practical and emotional aspects of making that decision, including how Amirra and her husband navigated these big financial questions, worked as a team to pay down an extraordinary amount of student debt, and planned for family future goals. Plus, we discuss passing down healthy money habits to kids and the importance of open conversations about finances in any family. So you're going to walk away from this with resources, inspiration, and maybe a fresh perspective on how your choices today can shape your family's future. And if you want to continue this conversation, Amirra shares more of her journey in the Money Matters in OT podcast, found on any podcast player. So let's dive in. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In. Today I have the privilege of hosting Amirra Condelee, who is an occupational therapist who has bridged the gap and has turned a bit into, she is a stay-at-home mom, but also talks a lot about finances and really brings knowledge to so many of us who are trying to say, what do we need to be able to make the choices that we want to be able to do? So Amirra, thank you for being here. I think this is going to be awesome for all homeschool families and also for other therapists, people who are listening. So thank you.
Sarah, thank you so much for having me and for that amazing introduction. I am super excited to be here today. I feel like we were talking earlier. I feel like I'm just talking to an old friend because I feel like we talk so much on social media and we connected a while ago, and I've been following your work in the homeschool world and with OT. So I am so excited to talk about some of my favorite things here today.
Awesome. Thank you. So can you just get started a little bit? Tell us about your OT journey and your journey, how you've made the decision to be a stay-at-home mom at this point and how they all go together, because they do.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to try to give you the short sped up version because I feel like there's a lot of little details in there. But so I initially I've always known that I wanted to work with kids. I thought that I wanted to be a pediatrician. And then I went to this super cool, albeit a little nerdy, of a medical camp, science camp. And we got to
Oh my
talk to
gosh, my
different
daughter was
specialists.
going to do that this
Oh,
summer.
no way. It was
so
actually
cool.
really cool. It was so fun. And so there I actually got to talk to a neonatologist, and my world opened up to the NICU. And I was like, wait, I want to do this. And so I started college thinking that I was going to become a neonatologist. And then I started taking the chemistries, and they call it a weed out course. And that is what happened to me. I was like, you know what? I actually don't want to do this because chemistry is not my forte. I loved biology. I loved anatomy. But when it came to the chemistry, I was like, oh my gosh, no. So I was like, what am I going to do? I still want to do something with the NICU. I want to do something in healthcare. I want to blend all of these things that I love and that I'm super passionate about. So at the time, I was actually nannying for a hand occupational therapist, and she had 3 boys. And I was like, hey, what do you do exactly? I know you work in healthcare. I see you wear scrubs, but like what exactly are you doing? Because you're not a nurse, you're not a doctor. And so she told me all about OT and I started shadowing a couple pediatric ones. And then I found out that OTs could be in the NICU. And I was like, this is it. I'm
This is
sold.
it.
And so I fast tracked my way. I switched over from pre-med bio major to psychology, started taking those courses, and that is how I discovered OT. And I felt like it was really the perfect blend of everything, the science, the creativity, the flexibility. At the time, I wasn't sure that I was going to have a family. You don't know when you're 18,
Right.
19 years old, but I knew that it was going to be a great career that offered that flexibility. That time came and yeah, I absolutely loved it. I went through OT school, and while I was in OT school, I actually did a lot of shadowing and clinical rotations, fieldwork experiences in the NICU, and so I got to see it firsthand. However, it's really hard to actually get into the NICU, and so I started hearing about early intervention while I was in the
Right.
NICU. All these families were being referred to this program, and I was like, well, what is this? Maybe I can work with these families because I don't know that I'll be able to get into the NICU as a new grad. It was really, it's not difficult, but it's not impossible, but it was very difficult. And so I started hearing about EI, and that's how I got into early intervention. And I practiced for, I think it was, gosh, the years blur and center around COVID, but I think it was about 3 years that I practiced full time in early intervention. And then I got pregnant. That's always like the key phrase, right? And then I got pregnant. And then I started reevaluating. Do I want to go back to work? Do I want to be a stay-at-home mom? And ultimately, it was a really tough decision, but I decided to take a career pause after a lot of conversations and prayer and all the
Mm.
things. And I decided to stay home full time with my baby. And I started thinking about going back. And then I found I was pregnant again. And I was like, okay, I guess we're just going to live the next few years. And yeah, I'm a full-time stay-at-home mom now, but I'm also a podcast host, a content creator. And so I really enjoy being able to still use my OT lens on a daily basis, but being able to just have those sweet moments with my kids as they're young.
Yeah. So you mentioned a lot about the decision making from going from working full time to then
Mhm.
being able to stay at home with your kids. And I know pieces of that are where our hearts are, where our
Yes.
priorities are, where our abilities to self-regulate in that area to be able to be at home. But there's also logistics in there,
Yes.
specifically financial. Can you talk a little bit about how you and your husband went about asking the questions and just making deciding factors of can we do this?
Yeah, so I think for us, first thing I'll say is my husband and I have always been extremely open about money and just communication. And we really approach our finances as a team. And so for us, it wasn't too much of a it wasn't too much contention over this idea of I want to become a stay-at-home mom. How are we going to make it work financially? It was just simply, how are we going to make it work? That's what you want to do. Great. Let's figure it out. Let's look at the numbers on paper. And we didn't have that barrier, but I think it's important to highlight that some families or partnerships might have that barrier where you're not
Right.
comfortable talking about money. Maybe you don't know exactly how much your spouse is making and how much you need to replace that income. And so that's like the foundation for it. But I feel like because we already passed that, we could jump right into, okay, let's figure out how are we going to look at how much you're making and how can we replace that income. And so for us, it was just laying it all out, looking at our finances, looking at what are we spending per month, how much are we bringing in, and then if we take out my income, what's going to happen. Now, for us, I will say student loans are probably like the number one factor because we both had a pretty significant amount of debt, which I think we're going to talk about. So I won't talk
Mhm.
about too much there, but we had a significant amount of debt. And so we really had to weigh in those factors. So the number one thing for us, honestly, was figuring out how to replace my income, but then also how to have my husband maximize his income. So he is a certified registered nurse anesthetist, a long word, but he does anesthesia. And so he had the opportunity to do travel positions. They're called locums, but it's very similar to travel therapy where you get housing covered, you get these different stipends and reimbursements, and you also get a higher income. And so we made the decision when my youngest was 4 months old. We packed up everything. We moved about 3 hours away to a very small rural mountain town, and we were able to stay there and be able to earn a significantly higher income, be able to pay off our loans, and for us to feel financially comfortable. Now, it was a huge sacrifice for us because we left our community, our friends, our
Yeah, your
church,
support
like everything,
network.
all of our
Yeah.
support. Yeah, but for us, it was worth it, and that's what we wanted to prioritize was being able to have me stay home but still feel financially comfortable. Yeah, I feel like that was like the major part of the conversation was how are we going to replace your income and how can we make sure that I can make more without necessarily needing to be gone more. So for him, he gets paid hourly, so it's like he was doing 24-hour shifts and I was like, okay, no, that's not gonna that's not gonna work.
Yeah.
I can't be left
Wow.
alone. for 24 hours on end with a baby. So we went somewhere where like the schedule was going to work out. But like I said, it was far from everything that we knew, but it was a
Yeah.
1000% worth it. We would do it all over again for sure.
So I recognize not everybody has the ability to be like, okay, so we can move this
Hmm.
transition to this job role, which will take us further away, but also be able to replace your income. For those people who can't necessarily replace a full income, were you thinking about other cuts or other ways that you could financially provide? What were some of those conversations like?
For sure. So there's the two areas. There's increased income, but then there's also decreased expenses. So we for sure had that conversation too around what are our like top monthly expenses. And typically
Mhm.
that's going to be for the average person, it's housing, it's transportation. So like your car, a big one is groceries, which I mean, in today's day and
Oh my
age,
goodness, yes.
totally makes sense. And so I think it's just really a lot of intentional choices. And for housing, it can be really like you might not be able to sell your house and move and downsize. But I
Right.
also do know some stay-at-home moms who have taken that route of downsizing their homes or renting, living with family. Like people
Mhm.
do very drastic things when they are trying to be able to become a stay-at-home mom and find out ways that you can cut. And so I would say like those big areas, we had one car for a very long time that
Yeah.
we shared. And sometimes it meant Mozzie was Ubering to work and we were saving on a car payment and being able to save up so that when we were ready to purchase a car, we could do it a smart way and be able to put more down so that you have
Mhm.
lower monthly payments. And so it's just a lot of small choices that really do add up over time. It's not going to the grocery store hungry and buying everything that you see, which I am so guilty of.
Same.
Meal planning
It's
and
actually not necessarily me,
yes.
it's my teenage kids
Oh, I
that
bet. Yeah.
like they do not step foot in the
Yep.
grocery store anymore. You are not
Oh,
allowed.
I completely get it. I get it. And I think too, the way that Mozzie's upbringing made him very intentional about financial choices too. So he grew up in a household where it was six of them,
Mhm.
six kids,
Wow.
all back to back, and one parent was working, one parent was staying home at certain times in their life. And so I think that he saw a lot of how his parents approach, like, okay, we have a parent who wants to stay home. How are we going to make that work? And even down to like meal planning and like dinner ideas for such a
Yeah.
large family, he was able to carry over into our family too. And so I think that, like I said, it's just those really small choices. And I'm not saying, okay, don't go get your coffee, because I know everyone says the coffees add up, and the coffees do add up, yes.
Yes.
But I'm a firm believer that there has to be some balance there. And so I think that we did a really good job of just seeing where we can cut back, but also being able to still take a vacation. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
smaller vacation or something like that. So, yeah, just those small choices and really doing a deep dive, I think, into your finances to see where you can cut back is really helpful.
Now, you may not have thought about this yet, and so you can go ahead and say that if you haven't. But
Mhm.
are there ways that you feel like that you're going to talk to your kids about this? And the reason
Mm.
I'm coming at this is that we as a family, so I have three kids who are all athletes, and we literally talked to a financial advisor recently about how much money that we put into sports, and which is a significant amount.
Yeah.
And he said at one point, he was like, if you invested that money this year, when they turned around 40 years old, you could literally have $400,000. And I said to my daughter one
Yep.
day, I was like, listen, if you don't play volleyball next year, when you turn 40 years old, I will give you
I love
$100,000.
that.
And she was like, no, what's worth it to her? Now, granted, her 40-year-old self might look back at her 17-year-old self and be like, "Ooh, that was a really
Yep.
bad choice." But that was her choice right now. So, are there ways that you're already thinking, this is what I need to talk about with my kids so that they will be able to have a strong
Hmm.
footing when they are older?
Gosh, that is such a good question. And I feel like that's definitely an area now that our youngest, so I have a 6 month old and a 2 year old. The 2 year old is starting to be so much more just aware of things. Previously, to answer the question, no, we weren't quite thinking about that just because we weren't there yet. But I think now that the 2 year old is there and he's starting to just understand more of, oh, daddy's going to work to make
Yeah,
money so that we can buy your sparkling waters you like just little things like that. I feel like we're starting to get into. Of course, we're doing a lot of financial planning for them for the future to pay for college and stuff like that.
right.
But they are not aware of that. But
Yeah,
I do think that's an area that we have actually like set a goal around for us is to figure out what type of language do we want to use with them and how can we really implement just healthy money habits. And I think a lot of times we grow up and we have these money narratives and money beliefs that are ingrained in us, like money doesn't grow on trees and things like
Mm,
that you carry into adulthood. And I think just us being even just mindful and conscious about how we talk about money right now, even as they're young, I think is something that we're going to carry on as they get older. And then as they get older, it's, yeah, you can start having those conversations about making smart money decisions. And just,
Right.
I really think we're focusing more so not even on the practical stuff of let's teach you how to budget. It's really about the relationship with money and having that healthy relationship with money, even from an early age, I think is where we're focusing in on right now.
All right, so we're gonna come back and talk about, if we can, your like huge paying off of debt. Hey listeners, we're going to take a quick break from our chat, but I have something super special to share with you. If you've been loving the stories and strategies that we talk about each week, you're going to want to check out our brand new book, co-authored by me and Jackie Adrian, called A Chameleon Tale, A Colorful Sensory Story. It's the perfect resource for anyone navigating the beautiful and sometimes challenging world of sensory needs and neurodiversity with their kiddos. Our book follows Sally and Seth, two adorable chameleons on their journey to the Chameleon Cafe, highlighting how every family member's sensory experience can be unique. Not only is it gorgeously illustrated by Jackie, seriously, these chameleons are so cute. But it's also designed as a meaningful conversation tool that you can use with your child to help them recognize and express what's going on inside their bodies. Imagine having a story that you can read together where your child can say, "Hey, I feel like Seth today. I need a," and then list one of the compensation strategies that Seth uses. And for parents, it's a way to give your children a language to talk about their feelings and their bodies. Plus, you'll find ideas for regulation strategies to try together. The book is available for order right now. Yes, right now. You can find A Chameleon Tale on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can request it at your favorite local bookstore or find it and its free book guide at homeschoolot.com/a-chameleon-tale. So support two mama authors, grow your family's emotional toolbox, and get a beautiful keepsake for your bookshelf. Order today and review it, and let's keep changing lives, one story at a time. Now, back to the episode. Welcome back. So Amirra has just, I don't know, achieved, is that the word? But achieved this huge milestone as far as debt. Could you talk a little bit more about that and how you guys worked through this as a couple, as a family, what you did?
Yes. So earlier I mentioned that we had a significant amount of debt, and you'll learn that I'm a super open, transparent person when it comes to finances. It took me years to get here, but now that I'm here, I don't really shy away from much of anything. So I'm happy to share the numbers. And so when I graduated from OT school, I had about $270,000 in debt. And then my husband graduated I think 2 years later from his graduate program, and he came out with $230,000 of debt. Quick math there, that is $500,000 of debt that we were sitting with in 2021, I think, is when he graduated. And so we are very excited. We are debt free as of February of this year. And so it took us a little while to get out of it. But yeah, so we're debt free, and we really approached it by just making it a priority. Now, it's also so much of it is mental, and I feel like it depends on how much the loans are like keeping you up at night. And I was a little bit more lax with it. My husband, however, he was like, I am so done with this debt. I want it to be gone. I have so many other financial goals that I want for ourselves. Like we didn't buy a house together. He does own a house from previously, but we don't own a house together. We eventually want to buy a home together for our family. We want to settle down, put down roots somewhere and stop doing travel. He wants to be able to retire early, vacation, and take care of our parents. And so we had so many other goals that needed the money that was being just siphoned into these student loans and trying to keep up with the interest in particular. And so we actually sat down with a financial coach. And her name is Shung, and she's online as Save My Sense. And she's actually a friend of mine too, so I fully trust her and fully recommend her. But we sat
We'll
down
make
with
sure
her.
that's linked to it. Save My Sense.
Save My Sense, yes.
Okay. CENTS?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And she actually just came out with a book called Wealth is a Mindset that's also really good. And so in talking to her, I was like, you know what? I feel comfortable with where we are, but I want to get another set of eyes on our whole situation and really give a different opinion. And so we were paying on our loans slowly but surely. And after talking to her and laying everything out, we realized that we could be a little bit more aggressive and get out of the debt a few years faster than our original plan. And so we sat down with her, and I think that was really like the catalyst for us being like, okay, wait, we can actually do this and be done with it. And so
Right.
we did, like I said, it was those two areas of increasing income and decreasing expenses. And so that's really what we did. We just buckled down and we made that last payment and it feels so good. It feels so good to be done.
Yes. Ooh. So, is there something different that you want to do for your children? So, the reason I'm coming at this, there are a lot of families who I've talked to recently. There was a pendulum, I feel like, that was all you have to go to college, you need to do whatever you have to
Yes.
do to get through there. To now, there's actually a bit of a pendulum swing the other way of like, really evaluate, is higher
Mhm.
education worth all the debt? So, is that a conversation you guys are already having? And what would you say to your kids at this point?
It's definitely a conversation. I think because when we look at the ROI, so the return on investment on my degree versus Mozzie's degree, it didn't make sense for me to have gone into that much debt given what my salary has been working as an OT. For Mozzie, however, that did make sense. The 230 made sense given what a CRNA typically is expected to make over the course of 5 years. And so
Right.
he knew, okay, I'm going into this much debt, but also the income is going to support being able to quickly get out of it. Versus for me, that wasn't so much the case. It would have taken me probably 20 to 25 years on my own working as an
I'm
OT. And
I'm
even
literally still
then,
paying mine.
yeah, I was
Yeah,
going to say I
and we
would have still
finished
been
in
paying it.
2008.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
definitely would have still been paying it. And I'm super open that his income is really what was able to support us being able to get out of both of our debt. And we're just in such a really blessed situation to be able to do that. And I know that's not the case for everyone. And student loan repayment is a topic I'm really passionate about. And I never want anyone to compare their journey to ours because it's not one size fits all. And there's so many different
Right.
factors that come into play. But in general, yeah, I would say the topic of the ROI on the degree is something we definitely want to have a conversation about with our kids. And so, if this is the profession that you want to pursue, let's look at the income, let's look at the debt, let's make sure that you're going to be able to pay that off in a reasonable amount of time. Now, I will say we also want to be able to either partially contribute to their education or
Yeah.
fully cover their education, obviously, depending on so many different factors. We have no idea what life is going to look like, but we are actively contributing to what's called a 529. So that will be able to hopefully help our kids go to school and not take out so much debt or if any debt at all, which would be like really great for us to be able to
Yeah.
do for them. But I think really just talking to them about how much is your salary going to be? How much is this school? Let's choose a cheaper school. Let's choose a cheaper path. And I think that I wish that I would have had someone having those conversations with me and, hey, you want to be an OT? Okay, great. But let's make sure that you're not going into such a massive amount of debt to do it so that your income can support being able to reasonably in a reasonable amount of time getting out of the debts. Yeah, I would say like the ROI on the degree and the profession that they choose to pursue is the conversation that we're going to have with them when they get that age, which is so weird talking about now because they're only,
Because they're
a
so
baby and
little.
a toddler. Yeah.
But yes, the planning can take forever. And
Hmm.
as homeschooling parents, these are things we can be talking about from the get-go. I will
Hmm.
tell you, my daughter is getting ready to go into college, so she's starting her senior year. And I was just meeting with an admissions counselor who actually happened to homeschool her children before. And
Nice.
she said their senior year, they had a class that she called grant writing, and they
Hmm.
read, a lot about grant writing. She had a couple
Hmm.
of books that she gave to me, which I will put in the show notes here. I don't remember them off the top of their head, but she had them write a scholarship application every
I
single
love
week their
that.
entire senior year. And she said
Hmm.
their at least freshman year was completely paid for
That's
by these
amazing.
scholarships that we have the privilege of doing as homeschool families of just, we're going to really hone in and focus on this.
Mhm.
That's what we're going to do next year. I just wrote it up the other day,
I
my
love
little
that.
syllabus of what this is going to look like for her and all
Yeah.
of that. So we do have some time. So thinking about some resources that I just mentioned here, were there resources that you and your husband specifically turn towards as you were making these financial decisions, or that you've read in the past that helped you to make these decisions?
Yes. So we are primarily self-taught in the sense
Mhm.
that we've taken different courses to help us figure out investing for retirement and budgeting and just retiring early, things like that. And so we have a few courses that we've taken. And then I think I mentioned that we had a financial coach that we worked with, and that was really helpful. We've read a couple of different books. And so maybe I can, instead of rattling them all off, maybe I can send you them and then you can put
Yeah,
them
I'll
into
put them
the
in the
show
show
notes,
notes for
some of
sure.
my favorites. There's a lot of just content on social media now too. Because now I have my token, the OTs world, but then also the personal finance niche. And so there's a lot of personal finance creators out there who are really great at just breaking down those concepts and really just instilling confidence that you can do this. I think for so long it's felt we, especially as like women, as healthcare providers, we don't have the same knowledge as people on Wall Street or big business people. And so it's just having that confidence that you can manage your own finances, I think is something that really helped us. Is just the more knowledge that you have, the easier everything starts to feel. And yeah, we did courses, we use the coach. We have met with a financial advisor twice, but we don't actively have a financial advisor because we are confident maintaining like our own portfolios and we don't want to pay someone to do something that we're capable of doing ourselves. But it's nice to just kind of meet with them every once in a while and get their opinion. And then we're like, okay, thanks. And that's also, yeah, there's so many resources and things out there depending on what type of learner you are and, what you're interested in.
Now, are you and your husband completely open as far as where accounts are? And now this is the reason I'm coming at this question. There's a really good friend of mine who is a homeschooling parent who she did the podcast with me, and I'll link to it here, on homeschooling through trauma and crisis, who recently lost her husband. And she thankfully was aware of all of their finances, but she said the number of people that she has talked to recently who did not, who would in her position be at she's able to grieve and feel sad, but not be worrying about logistics, right? And that could be a big piece. So are there tips that you have as far as just the logistics of communication about finances?
I think being involved, I think you really do have to, even though sometimes it may feel a little boring or overwhelming or just, I'm not interested in this. I do think being involved. And so like I sit in on our meetings with the financial advisor or with our CPA, even if I'm holding the baby in the background, I can't actively participate. I'm just listening, being able to know simple things like the password, the information to get into the different accounts. I will have to plug one of my personal finance friends. His name is Jeremy. He runs Personal Finance Club, which I absolutely love his content. He literally just released a new product and he's not super product heavy. I think he said his third product ever that he's launched, and he has a pretty like massive online platform, but he is more about just education versus launching things every 5 seconds. But he just launched this really cool product and it literally is exactly what you're talking about. If someone passes away, it has like the spreadsheets and everything. It's, if this happens, here is my digital box of being able to know where's our money, where are my accounts. And so I think it is an absolute fabulous product because it does have everything all in one place for you, just so that if anything were to happen. So I think just having things in order and having ease of access, we need that information.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I will make sure that's linked to you. You've given us so many fantastic, I think, resources and things to think about, because we don't want people to have to make a choice about how they're going to educate or their own educations going forward based on finances. But that is a practical reality that we need to be able to talk to. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a really good conversation. I feel like we touched on so many different things. So it was good. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The OT is In. I hope our discussion has provided valuable insights and support for your educational journey. Remember, as parents, it's essential to address our children's diverse learning and developmental needs. And here at Homeschool OT, we asked you, the parents, the most helpful way for us to support you. And the majority of you answered time to ask questions so you can stop being overwhelmed with the noise of all these varying suggestions, some often contradicting themselves. So if you are seeking personalized guidance, Homeschool OT now offers concierge services tailored to your family's unique requirements. You can book 1 session, 4 sessions, 12, 24, whatever. It's all on demand so that you can ask the questions and receive practical strategies, heartfelt encouragement to empower your homeschool experience. So to learn more about how Homeschool OT can support you, visit the services page at homeschoolot.com. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to having you with us on the next episode of The OT is In.